Deportiva y con swing. La factoría del deporte desde New York para ti es una máquina pensada para ti. Número uno en las redes, dale like y compartir. Con informaciones importantes siempre frescas y con entrevistas que te ponen de cabeza. Lo mejor del deporte lo encontrarás aquí. Búscale en las redes, dale like y compartir. Suscríbete, ahí sí, infórmate, ok. Dale a la campana para que te llegue.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Would also like to welcome all those that are watching on any of the Mets and SNY social channels. And we will begin today's special agenda with turning it over to Mets team president, Sandy Alderson.
Thanks, Harold. Thanks, everybody, for being on this memorable Zoom call. It's my pleasure to affirm that pursuant to a vote by the Mets Hall of Fame committee, Keith Hernandez, number 17, will be retired this year in a ceremony on July 9th. This is one more step in celebrating Mets history and its great players. Keith is only the fourth Mets player to have his number retired and is the fifth overall, including Jackie Robinson. Keith came to the Mets in 1983 in a lopsided trade with St. Louis, played a memorable part of the 1986 championship team, hit .310 during that season with a .446 on-base percentage. Music to my ears. He was a first team captain elected in 1987 and was elected to the Mets Hall of Fame in 1997. A great career, named to 5 All-Star teams, 11 Gold Gloves, 6 with the Mets, batted .297 through his Mets career, which is second in Mets history. And of course, he's been a member of the Mets TV booth for the last 22 years, 16 of those on SNY. It's my pleasure to introduce great player, great announcer, and number 17, Keith Hernandez.
I gather that's my cue, Sandy.
That's your cue, Keith.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was caught completely off guard yesterday. I got a phone call from team owner Steve Cohen, and he's in my address book, and I told Sandy earlier, his name popped up on my screen. I'm going, oh, okay, maybe he wants to talk about the team. So we had around a 10-minute conversation about the events that have happened, I think positive events in the offseason for the Mets. And then he said, well, this is not the reason why I'm calling. And then he dropped the bomb on me. So it caught me completely by surprise. I had no idea. And it's just kind of soaking in and sinking in now today. The import of this, it is really, if you think of it, and I'm so honored, is that this is the highest honor that an organization can give to a player. And I grew up as a kid like everybody else, going to baseball games and going to some of those parks with the names up on the wall, and not the names, the numbers are retired. And for me, just a little old blue collar kid growing up in Northern California on a beach town called Pacifica, 17 miles south of Candlestick Park, a dream to be a ball player, and then to have attained that and all the success, fortunately, that I had through in Major League Baseball. I had a lot to do with my former teammates as well. But this is unbelievable. I am just ecstatic and so proud and so thankful.
Keith, thank you for those words. And before we get to the questions, speaking of one of your former teammates and somebody you're very familiar with, I believe we have Mr. Ron Darling joining us. And we wanted to make sure Ron, I know you had some thoughts that you wanted to share that we'd all enjoy hearing. So I'll let you take it away. All right, hold on a second. Let's get Ron connected. Ronnie, can you hear us? Just or unmute yourself there, Ron. You have the ability to do that too. We'll give you another second here.
Either that or we'll make a call to the bullpen.
All right, there will be plenty of time to come back to Ron, so we will make sure to do that. But let's get
Hello.
to. Oh,
There he is.
Oh, sorry,
There's
guys. I
Ronnie.
apologize for that. Yeah, still don't know the Zoom technology. Unbelievable.
You're fine, Ronnie. Jump right in, please.
Well, just boy, Keith couldn't be happier from Daryl and Wally. You had great things to say, and I was lucky enough. I'll exclude '83 because I was just a September call up, but played with Keith from 1984 on, and all I can say is what I think all of his teammates would reiterate that played with him at that time. He just brought a winning culture, and just the way he moved and the way he acted and the way he played. The one thing that Keith did, I think, for that entire ball club, he was not a rah-rah guy. He was not a guy that said a lot in the clubhouse, but he brought it every single night. And I think that rubbed off on all the young players there, that, his intensity, I'm not saying he did want this, but it seemed like he wanted it more than you. And you had that energy that on the field, and he expected that path as well. So I just know he was an inspiration for the entire team. He's been like a big brother for me for all these years. And I was trying to think of the history of New York sports, and I think of Keith a little bit like think of Mark Messier, a world champion with another organization, an MVP player, a guy that once he wore a New York uniform brought instant credibility. And that's what Keith was for our 86 players.
Thank you, Ron, for sharing that. We were going to go to some questions here. Reminder, if you'd like to ask one, please use the raise your hand tab at the bottom of the screen. And obviously, Sandy has remained on. Ronnie is still here. And of course, Keith. So with that, Steve, we're going to come to you first on your iPhone. Your line is open.
To give my name or affiliation for this one?
I don't know. Have you all met?
Yeah, I've met him once before. Hey, Keith, congratulations again, man. You said that you were so stunned when you got the phone call. It wasn't on your radar at all. What have these last 24 hours been like? How have the emotions hit you in different ways as the time has passed and it's started to sink in what's happening?
Well, I found out late afternoon, and obviously got on the phone to talk, to try to get a hold of my family, which I couldn't get a hold of anybody. No one answered, and they eventually they trickled back and got back in touch with me. I can't think of the right term. I want to think of, I don't think bewilderment is the right term, but I do feel like I'm lost in space, that it happens to me, an honor like this, and something I never dreamed of. You dream of being on a world championship team. You dream of being a batting champion or an MVP, and those are the thought of having a number retired, I can tell you, never crossed my mind as a kid growing up. And as I was playing in St. Louis or in New York. So It's kind of soaked in. I had a good night rest last night, and fortunately, Haji didn't wake me up like he normally does at 5:30 at the crack of dawn. He gave me an extra hour of sleep. So I was able to sleep till around 6:30, and I turned off all my devices so I can get some sleep. So I'm refreshed today, and it's starting to soak in now. And I'm just really, it's just incredible. I never would have dreamed this in a million years. It's just amazing.
And you mentioned that it's the highest honor from an organization. You're in the Mets Hall of Fame already. You were honored with the Cardinals Hall of Fame this past summer. Just what to you is different about this compared to getting into teams Hall of Fames? Just how much, more of an elevated status do you kind of view that number retirement as?
Well, it kind of puts you on a different stratosphere, I think. I mean, there's only there's only two managers, and I'm the fourth player. So it's rarefied air. I'm in a wonderful group with Piazza and Seaver and Kuzma and Casey and Gill. And Gill getting in the Hall of Fame this year. It just seems like all the pieces are coming together. It's the 60th anniversary of the Mets, if we can believe that. We're going to unveil Tom Seaver's statue this year. It just seems like all the dominoes are falling into place, and for me to be one of those pieces just means the world to me.
Next up, we'll go to Mike Vaccaro. Mike, your line's open.
Keith, congratulations. There were a huge generation of Mets fans who came to the Mets during the 80s when you galvanized them. And for years, they were not only upset that your number wasn't retired, but they got upset every time 17 showed up on some random player. I'm curious, was there ever a moment when you thought it just wasn't going to happen? And secondly, what did you think when you saw number 17 on the likes of Mr. Koo and the other roster of people who wore it after you did?
Well, actually, I'll talk about when David Cohn wore my number the year after I left in my honor, which was very flattering. David and I were such great friends from the get-go, good teammates, and that meant a lot to me. As the other part of the question, seeing the other players with my number, and the equipment manager that was Charlie Samuels, I've almost went to Charlie and said, "What the heck you doing, Charlie?" It's like a J.C. Penney's sale here. But it didn't detract from any of the significance. It was actually, of all the numbers I wore 37, of course, in St. Louis, because I couldn't wear 17 because it was Dizzy Dean was retired. And then when I came over to the Mets, I was really kind of looking for another number with a 7. And they said, "Well, you can't wear number 37 because of Casey." And I said, "That's fine. What number do you have available for me?" And they said, "Well, we have 17. And I go, "Perfect." I always liked odd numbers, and I liked numbers in the teens, and I have always had to have a 7 on my back, not 7 by itself because of my childhood idol, Mickey Mantle.
Thank you, Keith. Next up, Tony DeComo will come to your line.
Hey, Keith, congratulations.
Thank you.
Steve had mentioned some of the honors that you've gotten recently, the Cardinals Hall of Fame, things like that. I'm curious, do these things make you think at all about the National Hall of Fame? You see Gil Hodges finally get in, some other guys finally get in. A lot of people think you should have been in 15 years ago. I'm just curious how much you think about that sort of thing.
Well, certainly things are happening kind of rapidly. I mean, obviously, quite a while ago I didn't even realize it was 97 when I got into the Mets Hall of Fame last year. The Cardinals, both very significant. There's not too many players that are, I think, that are in two-team Hall of Fames. But the number retiring is something that is enormously significant and such an honor. Whether it turns into me getting consideration or down the road, we'll have to wait and see. I know I think with Gil getting in, which I think he deserved to get in. If you look at his numbers, they're pretty extraordinary numbers with Brooklyn. And he should have been in a long time ago. And I think also with Jim Cott getting in, I think Tommy John will now follow. I do think that Dick Allen will follow, and deservedly so. I do feel that of all the sports, Baseball Hall of Fame is the one that really, I think, is the gold standard, and it should remain that way. But there's always players that you feel should be in there that aren't in there, and vice versa. I have no control over it. Do I want to get in the Hall of Fame? Well, shoot, yeah, I would love to get in the Hall of Fame. But we'll have to wait and see. It's just out of my hands, and I've been out of the game a long time. Maybe the analytics that have come into the game, like Sandy loves me with that 446 on base percentage. I fit right into his where he likes his players. So maybe that'll have some play going forward. So we'll see. It's very interesting. Hopefully I've got another 15, 16, 17, 18 years left of life, and maybe it'll happen before I kick the bucket.
Thanks, Keith. Congrats again.
Eddie Coleman, let's come to your line next. Go ahead, Ed.
Thanks, Harold. Congratulations, Keith.
Thanks, Ed.
You've had the St. Louis honor last year, and now this coming this year. And I just wondered recently if you've thought back to your roots at all. You mentioned growing up in Pacifica. I think your dad was a first baseman too. And
yes.
I just wondered if you've thought back on that over the last 24 hours, how proud he'd be of you after what happened last year and now this honor too.
Well, both my parents, actually, it was a team effort. Mom everything revolved around sports. I did think that when I talked with my brother, and one of the first thoughts that came in my mind, I just wish my parents could be alive for this, but hopefully they're up there and they're looking down, because they put a lot of time into my brother and I. So all that hard work. And my dad was an ex-professional player, as everybody knows, and a left-handed first baseman, taught me how to play the game, taught me how to play first base. And not only taught me how to play first base, I knew all the positions, relays, rundowns at a very young age. In Little League, I was very schooled in the proper way, the fundies, I guess I say on the air, the fundamental part of the game. And it's important that I think that, offense overshadows the other side of the field, because you can win or lose games just as easily with a glove on as opposed with a bat.
Thanks. Congrats again.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Next, we'll go to you, Tyler. Your line is open.
All right, congratulations, Keith. Really happy for you.
Thank you.
I think it's cool how the Mets have been honoring some of their players a little more the last few years than before. Do you get the sense of that? Particularly, I mean, you look across town. The Yankees have numbers retired for a lot of guys who were, very important to the franchise, even if they're not in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Mattingly and Guidry and Maris and guys like that. Do you feel that the Mets are now sort of joining that wave of like really digging into their own past and honoring guys who matter to the franchise like you?
I do, and I think it's been publicly spoken by Steve Cohen, our new owner, that he wants to create this tradition. I mean, the Mets, everybody, well, from my age, you think of the Mets. I remember when they came through in '62 when they first joined the National League. I was, I would have been 8 years old, my first year in Little League. And, okay, fine. No one really cared about the Mets or the Houston Astros, whether the Colt 45's then. But they're 60 years old now. It's the 60th year in baseball. And that is that is significant, and there is history, and there should be tradition, and I think that this is all, maybe this is all coming together. You've got the 60th anniversary. You got the unveiling of the Seaver statue. I'm going in. My number's getting retired. That this is kind of a snowball effect. We just recently had Mike Piazza's number retired. So I think it's very important that the fans have a sense of the history of their team, it's generational. My dad took me to my first game. It goes on, and you are influenced by your parents, and my father was a Cardinal fan, so I grew up a Cardinal fan, and it's that kind of influence and that kind of camaraderie, that kind of bringing the family together, which sports, and particularly baseball, because it's a summer sport, and you can sit in the ballpark and on a nice day, not on a wintry day, and in a t-shirt or whatever, and have conversation with your mom and dad and your brothers, sisters, your cousins. I think that's what's unique about baseball.
Yeah, and you have, you have that perspective. 60 years now that the Mets have been around, but when you got to the New York, it was only 21 years, I guess. So my other question would be, how did the perception, like Ronnie was talking about earlier, how did the perception of the Mets change from before you got there to when you got there? What was your perception of the Mets in the early 80s, let's say?
Well, the Mets went through hard times after the Seaver trade, and was it 77?
Yeah.
Okay, and we all know that 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83 were dark years. And we in the Cardinals, with the Cardinals, we were on the up, and the Mets were on the downside. And then they became a last place team. So coming over in 83 was a very unsettling year for me, because you get traded in the middle of the season. I remember Dave Kingman meeting me in the clubhouse. Dave Kingman, who was so deadpan, never any emotion, just straight face. I never saw him smile. He had a big smile on his face to greet me, to shake my hand, and said, "Thank gosh you're here, because you're my ticket out of here." That was the first words I heard. So I'm going, Seaver comes up to me and says, "Welcome to the Stems." And I go, "Stems?" He goes, "Mets spelled backwards." I went, where am I? I can't. I left a team in first place, was a defending world champion. And I'm going, oh my gosh. I get on the bus to go after the ball game, to go back to the hotel. There's no one on the bus. I go into the hotel bar after the game. There's no one in the hotel bar. I went, oh boy. And so I had 3 months to kind of soak it all in. And I really didn't play that well. That second half, I wasn't satisfied with that. And then when I made the decision to stay, which was basically my dad, I was really thinking about getting back to the West Coast, maybe LA or San Diego. And I had read where Jack McKeon was interested in me, and Lasorda was. And then I talked to my father, and I know this story has been around, but during the strike year, 81, when there was a big long strike in the split season, I think ESPN was showing games on TV in the minor leagues. And I had my dad, I bought him a satellite, and he saw some of the minor league games on the satellite. And he said, there's this kid, Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry, that I think that you might want to stay. I think they're on an upswing. And I made so many decisions in my life that got me in trouble that, I said, my dad's usually been right. And I really was influenced by him. That's why I stayed. And that's the truth. It was just really a roll the dice. And once I committed to staying and signed the contract, I was committed to that team. And I went into spring training, really kind of walking on eggs, not knowing what I got myself into, committing for 5 years. And within 2 weeks, when I saw all the talent, I said, well, doggone it, Dad was right. And I just completely got re-energized was the middle of my career. I'd attained everything. MVP, batting title, world championship was the last one, gold gloves. I needed a shot in the arm. And all being around, I was 30 years old, I believe, and being around all those young guys. And I knew that they were looking at me because there's a responsibility of being a veteran. And that was with Lou Brock in St. Louis when I came up. I remembered I watched Lou Brock, and Lou Brock had such an influence on me. And I just took that mantle there, and but it was effortless because they were so enthusiastic and they made me enthused. And we just had a wonderful time in spring and then had a wonderful 84.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm very lucky. I'm blessed. Trust me.
Keith, your next question will come from Tim Britton.
Hey, Keith, congratulations again.
Thank you.
I want to ask kind of similar off of what Tyler said and what Ron said earlier about building a winning culture there. You know, how explicit was that in your mind that you had to set that kind of example, or does that kind of thing happen naturally the way you went about your business on a regular basis?
Number one, I came in the best shape of my life for spring training. I was never a guy that worked out in the off season. And that year I had finally separated from my family in St. Louis, and I had to get out of St. Louis. And so Gary Matthews, the left fielder of the Phillies, said, well, come on to Philadelphia. Staying at the Hotel Warwick. I'm staying there, and we'll get you an efficiency room with all the amenities. Just stay in Philly over the off season. Well, he was a runner, and I started running. I never ran cross country in my life, and I would run to the art museum and back through the river back there with all the boathouses. And I really came in the best shape of my life. And I think that was career changing for me, not only a new environment, but I came in shape, and I was running better on the sprints than some of the young guys, because and I would make fun of them and start having competitions in sprints. And I just accepted the role, and it was just, to me, it's what Lou did for me. And I swore, because there was a time in my career where I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, if I wouldn't have made it without Lou's guidance. And I said, now the tables are turned. I'm the veteran now, and I'm seeing all these guys looking up to me, and I better comport myself professionally and set an example. And that's started in spring training, and it just carried through the season.
You
the rest of my career.
You said 2 weeks in, you saw the talent they had in spring training. At what point did you get the feel that this team has the culture, the clubhouse it's going to need to go that last mile?
Well, we were a young team, and we had Ronnie, who was really a diamond in the rough in '84, had a great arm, and I just knew he had unbelievable potential. And he had Doc, of course, who had the phenomenal rookie season at 19. You know, I think Davey had a lot to do with it. I think Davey was a great hire because he had managed in the minor leagues and he knew the players. Wally Backman probably never would have been given a second shot if it wasn't for Davey. And it just, I can't remember chronologically when I started feeling we had a chance. And got as close in August, we got real close. We just couldn't beat the Cubs that year. And the Cubs, to this day, if they didn't get Rick Sutcliffe, who I think went 16-1, they didn't make that trade. I think we win the division. We lost by 5 games, something like that, and fell out. But we were young, and that gave us our first taste. But I think that Davey had a lot to do with our development, and he knew the players. It's much like what Ken Boyer was to me. I had struggled. I played great for him in AAA, hit 350, batting title, hit 330. He saw me play. Now, if they had hired an outside manager that didn't know me, it might have been a whole different ballgame. But Boyer knew my talent, and he put me in there, and he stuck with me and told me that. And I think the same thing that Davey did with all those young players that he managed in the minor leagues. He knew them. It was the perfect hire, and he was the perfect manager for us.
Matthew Roberson, your line is open.
Hi, Keith. Matthew Robertson from the Daily News. I don't think we've had a chance to meet in person yet. Congratulations. And the question I have for you is one that I think a lot of us and a lot of fans certainly have about your jersey retirement, which is, why did this take so long? Did you get any information from the club about, why the wait was so long and why they specifically chose now to do it?
No, I never inquired. I just took each year as it came by. It wasn't something that crossed my mind very often. I was very pleased that Piazza's number was retired. It was very, very much very worthy, and also retiring Kuzman's number. So I think when those things happen, remember Mike was the first number to be retired in quite some time, and so maybe the worm was starting to turn a little bit, and maybe. Then they retired Kuzman's number, and then I thought that things were kind of going in the right direction. That maybe it could happen, but it's not something that I thought about, and it wasn't going to ruin my day. If it happened, it happened. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Thank you.
Mark Roseman, your line is open.
Hey, Keith, congratulations, as well as congratulations on the upcoming 40th anniversary of the A2 championship as well. You mentioned your dad taking you to the ballpark and you seeing those numbers, but another thing you talk about a lot on the air is growing up playing Stratomatic. And
Yes.
I'm just wondering, when you had all those iconic players you're looking at right, awesome. Did you ever dream that you too one day was going to be one of those iconic guys that someone wants on their Stratomatic team because he's a retired player and in 2 Hall of Fames?
Oh boy, no, I used to always love playing on the road for one reason, and I've never felt any pressure on the road. I always felt more pressure at home, getting the big hit late in the game in front of the home folks. With all the excitement on the road, you'd get booed. And I always thought back, I remember one particular game, Dad took us against the Cardinals. We're in Candlestick, and he got seats on the first base dugout side, down low. And he had us really focus on Bill White and his footwork around first base. He really wanted to watch us watch Bill, who was a Gold Glover. And so I always figure when I'm on the road, there's a parent out there or parents with their children, and they might be watching me. And I always got a big kick out of that. So I always wanted to go and have a big day on the road. And that, we'd go home and go, gosh, Eddie Matthews, he wouldn't 3-run home run in the 9th, what a player, and so you relive those childhood things, and you feel that, there's a family in Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Montreal, San Diego, and their parents are talking about the game that I had, a particularly good game that I had on the road, or I made a nice play in the field, So that always was important to me, and I always look forward to the road. Always look forward to playing on the road.
Next up, Pat Ragazzo will come to your line.
Hey, Keith, congratulations.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what was it like, or what can you say, I should say, about the influence that Gary Carter had on your career, as you two were considered the 2 team leaders on those 80s Mets teams?
Well, Gary was an enemy for most of my career. We only played, 5 years together. So he was always on those good Montreal teams, so it was always competitive. When we played together, I realized that, number one, I realized this was a great trade, and we gave up a lot to get him, but we got a catcher with our young pitching staff, and Gary Carter always called, I felt, the most aggressive game, and was a hands-on catcher and a real dominant figure. So I was just thrilled. I knew it was going to be very beneficial for our pitching staff, and particularly our young starters. And he had a lot to do with that. On the other hand, too, I realized that there were going to be two guys here, and I was going to make sure that there was never any. Can you imagine if Gary and I didn't get along, or we were being childish and not team thinking, and creating an issue within the clubhouse, which would be on the back page of all the papers. It would become a story. So I was determined that spring that I was going to embrace him, and I had no reason not to embrace him. I liked Gary when he was with Montreal, but I was making sure that we were going to walk forward together, and it was not going to become a problem for Harold or Jay. I didn't see Jay Horace was here. Jay would have had a cow if there would have been a problem with Gary and I. And you got to remember one thing: it's a team, and no one's above the team. Everybody has the same rules. You got to be on time. No preferential treatment, and it's very egalitarian, I guess. So, did he have an influence on me? I was already established. I just admired watching him play and catch with his bad knees. I saw what he had to do every game with icing his knees down before and after, and then going and squatting for 9 innings, and then playing his butt off, running on and off the field. It was very admirable. I admired him.
Eddie Coleman, let's come back to you. I believe you have a question for Ronnie.
I do, as a matter of fact. Ronnie, besides the glove, behind you, and the bat and the good fundies and all that stuff, what was your first impression about Keith? And did you think he could be the leader of this bunch as you guys move forward? If you're there.
Nope, give him a second here, Eddie. He's going to, I am sure he is working on unmuting now. We did so well all season long with Zooms with Ron. We'll come.
The Wi-Fi doesn't work good out there in Connecticut. You know that. Pay all those taxes and you get into bad Wi-Fi.
No, we got a few more, so let's get to that, and then we'll definitely circle back to Ron momentarily. Jerry Beach, let's go to you next with your question.
Hey, Keith. I know you said this came as a most pleasant surprise yesterday, but I was wondering, when you were on the field with Ron last July at his Hall of Fame ceremony, did the possibility of having another day in your honor in terms of a jersey retirement ever crossed your mind even briefly? And have you thought about what it'll be like this year to enjoy your upcoming honor with both Ron and Gary?
I think what I said before, I think it was all this stuff that's happening, like dominoes are falling, where, now you got Gary and Ron, and you had Piazza. Did it cross my mind of getting my number retired? I can tell you, no, it did not. I did not think it would happen. So I never really gave it much thought, and it wasn't like I was chomping at the bit and, oh my God, I want it so bad. I just didn't think about it. And, sometimes it's best that things don't happen as quickly. And I think that the timing of this, right now with the 60th anniversary of the Mets, which is, I think, tremendous, something to celebrate. Seaver's statue, what's going to go on this season. I just think that the timing is perfect, and I think that the fans are just going to absolutely love it. It's something they've wanted, as you guys have mentioned, for so long. And the fact that we're going to have an old timers game again, we're going to bring in 50 players, I understand. That is fantastic. And I just think it's just a whole change of the environment and the climate of the Mets organization in a very, very positive way.
All right, Ron, I think your mic might be open if you recall Ed's question.
Yeah. I didn't. Sorry, Eddie. What did you ask? I apologize. I didn't hear it.
Okay, Ronnie, I just wondered, besides the glove behind you and, everything that Keith brought, what was your first impression when you saw him? And did you think he could become the leader of your bunch as you move forward?
Well, he was the leader from day one, Eddie. He just had done so much in the game. None of us had done a thing. So we looked up to him from day one, and that he was so gracious to all of us meant the world, of course. But, I've been lucky enough, I was with Sandy for many years and played with Ricky Henderson and Canseco's and McGuire's and Strawberries and Goodens and so many great players. And I always say this to everyone, and the best player I ever played with was Keith Hernandez, because he could beat you with his bat and he could beat you with his glove. And, it was really just a pleasure to watch him play. I was probably raised a lot like Keith was, with a father who taught me how to play the game and how to play the game correctly. And until I watched him play, I didn't know that it could be played that correctly.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Mark Healy, let's go to your line next, please.
Congratulations, Keith. Two-parter for me. Number one, I know you've spoken to this before, but obviously Rusty Staub had a very, big impact on your career with the Mets. Talk a little bit about Rusty and what he meant to you, and also the honor of being the first captain in Mets franchise history. Those two things, along with your number retirement, must mean a lot to you as you reflect.
Well, Rusty, I know when it came to spring training in '84, there was only a handful of guys living in Manhattan. Ronnie was going to live in Manhattan, Ed Lynch, Danny Heap, Rusty, of course. And I had, in that off season prior to '84, had separated and from my family, my wife at that time. And Rusty didn't know. And we were just fiddling around the outfield, shagging. And I told him that I was separated, and that was basically going to be it. And he goes, then you got to stay in the city. Because you got to stay in Manhattan. So I had no idea. And he basically said, just rent the first year, find out where you like, what neighborhood, and you got to stay on the east side because you don't want to go across town. And that because you're going to have to go over, the 59th Street Bridge as it was called then, the Midtown Tunnel, or the Triborough as it was called then. And you want to be on the east side. So I wound up renting at the Dag Hammarskjöld building in Turtle Bay. And Rusty basically, and I think all of us, Ronnie can speak to this, Rusty took us to all the restaurants, all the fine restaurants. He kind of really introduced us to Manhattan. And also we had his restaurant up on 74th and 3rd, Rusty's. And we would always have lunch there. And then I wound up staying. It took me, I think because of Rusty, if I'd have been thrown into Manhattan, not knowing what to do, where to go, or it might have been more difficult. But with Rusty, it was, he introduced me to so many different people and made the adjustment so easy. And I fell in love with the city. And shoot, in around a month, I realized what a wonderful city it was. So yes, he's significant. He's a dear friend. We miss him. And as far as your last question, your second question, there's a lot of. It's just like all the honors that are bestowed upon me. They're just I was just trying to be a major league ball player and a good one. I didn't want to be a backup player. I didn't want to be a 250 hitter. I wanted to be a star. And all the other things that came with it, I never dreamed. All the individual accomplishments and all the individual honors and the 2 world championships, which mean the most because it's team. I feel very, very blessed and lucky that I had this. And the most important thing too is that it was the second half of my career. Cardinals were in transformation from the Gibson, Brock, McCarver era when the 67, 68 World Series, they were in transition and we had some rocky years because we were the new generation coming up. And when I got traded to the Mets, it really was I consider that the second half of my career. We had the winningest record of anybody in the 80s. And it was always a winning season, always fighting for a division. And I'm very fortunate that chronology came about for me. I was always in the hunt late in my career.
All right, we have time for a couple more. Lloyd of Queens, you are up, my friend.
Thank you, Harold, and congratulations, Keith. Keith, you mentioned that you bought your dad a satellite during the 1981 labor stoppage. And I think in 85, there was a labor stoppage when you were playing as well. I was just curious what your gut feel is about this current labor stoppage. Are you following the issues? Do you see this as something that you think will get resolved fairly quickly? Or do you see this really being something that will be drawn out perhaps on the 81 level?
Well, I was a player rep for 12 years and went through lockouts, and at that point, 81 was the longest professional sports strike in the history of professional sports. It's always positioning. It's always about the money, and from both sides. And to me, you don't want to kill the golden goose. I think you got to have a strong memory of this. The World Series strike was at 94, I believe. It left a very, very bad taste in baseball fans' mouth. Took a long time for the fans to get over that. I think both sides have to consider that. My feeling is it always comes down to the 11th hour, and I think that they'll find a way to get the season going.
All right, Anthony Reaver, under the gun here, your line is open.
I have a question for Sandy. Did Keith just break some news? Is there going to be an Old Timers Day game and ceremony this year?
My big mouth, I feel like Ralph Cramden.
I think that, that is certainly on our agenda. And, to some extent, whether we win and, we have that Old Timers Day is going to depend on the schedule otherwise and what we have in the way of, a number of games and so forth. But it's definitely on the agenda. To the extent that it gets on the calendar itself, we'll make sure everybody's aware of it. But it's definitely in our.
Thank you, Sandy. Final question will go to Joe Bantorno. Your line is open.
Hi, Keith. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ever since you made the decision to sort of stick with the Mets, you've been a fixture here in Queens and within the fan base for parts of the last 5 decades. Did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be here for this long and such an integral part? And I guess, what does this franchise mean to you? Thanks.
I know I never dreamed that I would be, gosh, for 50 years, maybe 40. Don't make me feel like I'm that old, my God. No, I never dreamed that I would be become a fixture in the organization. I never dreamed of being in the booth. How that came about was very happenstance. I was up at Elaine's of all places, and my first agent, David Katz, came up to me and said, "You should be announcing." And I said, "No, I don't want." I was like, I didn't watch baseball for 5 years after I retired. I just had to get away from it. he said, well, I mean, let me leave you my card, and you mind if I call you every once in a while to see if you change your mind? And he kept calling. And then finally I said, okay, go ahead. And it was around, I think 2 years later, and he went and pitched it to the Mets. And that's how it started. And it really started with 15 games. I think it was MSG back then when they had a revolving door of announcers, and it built up to this, which I always felt that the Mets should have done. It should have had myself in San Francisco growing up with Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons, who were the voice of the Giants, to have that connection as a fan to your radio people, your radio announcers, and your TV is so critical. And even though you had 17 years of Ralph, Lindsay, and Bob, that kind of changed in between there. And I think it was a positive thing. So I never would have dreamed I'd have gotten in the booth. Well, I would be a part of the organization to this day. I think the fact that I'm still in New York is just because it's New York City, and there's only one New York City. And I've fallen in love with Manhattan and in the surrounding areas a long time ago. And I love it here. Love up there. I'm down in Florida here right now, obviously. But it's just such a remarkable city, and there was no reason to leave. I was having too much fun.
Very good. Keith, we all congratulate you again. Can't thank you enough for joining us. Hearing your stories and these sentiments are just are priceless for all of us. Thank you to Ron and Sandy as well. Again, reminder, the game will be Saturday, July 9th. And for all your readers and those audiences still listening in, you can continue to get tickets at mets.com/tickets. And we look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thank you again, all.
Soy Juan Bené. Les invito a que sintonicen la máquina deportiva. No se van a perder ni una en el deporte.